Hey,
Hi everyone.
Uncle Carol, how are you?
Fine, thank you so much.
Great to see you. I'm looking forward to introducing your session. I'm really excited about this. And Carol, if I can, introduce you to everybody. Carol is a biologist from the National University of Colombia, a master's student in biological sciences at the National Autonomous University of Mexico in the Laboratory of Ecology and Conservation of Terrestrial Vertebrates of the Institute of Ecology. That's a lot of big words in there, Carol, but it's very exciting stuff. We know you're doing. It couldn't be any better. And you're a conservation ambassador for the Global South Bats, a network of bat scientists in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and a National Geographic Young Explorer. So it's brilliant to be running alongside you on this essential session, Carol. We're talking about biodiversity. Here we are, global biodiversity, your work with bats and the whole Ecology Institute that you do. It's absolutely vital stuff. I'm very much looking forward to your session, and hopefully there'll be time for a few questions at the end. We've got a lot of global interest. I'm looking at all the comments and questions coming in from around the world. So no pressure, Carol. You're talking to the planet. Over to you.
Thank you so much. That's good to know that I have no pressure. Thank you for those great words and thank you all for inviting me. I will be sharing my screen now. And let's talk about a little bit of the work that I just confirmed that you can see my screen.
We've got it. Thank you.
Perfect. So thank you all for inviting me today here to talk you a little bit of what I've been working in my master's degree in Mexico. With all this thing in the festival about which country are you from is a curious situation for me because I'm now in Spain doing an internship, but I'm actually doing my master's in Mexico, but I'm actually Colombian. So we are kind of representing a lot of backgrounds here, and my field work, especially for this project, which is my master's, is in Mexico, and it's trying to assess the contribution of insectivorous bats to pest control service in Mexican rice fields. So we are talking about the importance of these incredible mammals in the production of one of the most important crops in the world, which is rice. And the thing is that around 20% of the calories that we as humanity consume every year is it comes from rice, especially in Asia, where that calorie count goes up to 50% because people there eat a lot of rice. But for example, in Mexico, that is not the exception. Like there is an estimate that around 10% of the total food household budget for an average Mexican family goes only to consume rice. So this is a very important grain, and it's the third more consumed in Mexico, right after bread, like after wheat and corn, because of tortillas and bread. And as any other crop, it's very susceptible to a wide variety of insectivorous and to herbivorous insects that can generate some diseases over these kind of plants. So one of the insect pest groups that generates the most important effects, negative effects on yield on rice crops around the world is rice botters. So rice botters are these kind of moths or nocturnal butterflies that when they are in larval stage, just as any other butterfly that we know, that they go like larva and then pupa or like this cocoon and then to butterfly is the same for these moths. But the thing is that when they are in larval stage, they go inside the rice in the distillers or is the stem of the like of the spike where eventually is gonna get form the grain. The larva goes inside and start feeding on the plant. So this feeding totally disrupts the nutrient interchange between the productive parts of the plant, which is the like all the nutrients in the roots and the leaves, like doing photosynthesis, to the actual production of the rice grains. So we get to see these kind of symptoms that are called blank panicle, that is basically an empty spike. So you are not producing rice in here, and this has this particular color that is like white. And at the same time, we have our heroes, which are bats. So bats are incredible mammals that are the main nocturnal predators for nocturnal arthropods. And they have this incredible ability of changing the areas that they use to adapt to insect outbreaks. So, for example, there are some studies that are showing that whenever a pest, for example, here we can see moths per trap. Like this is a Helicover pasea, which is a moth that attacks corn in this case. And you can see that as long as moths are high, bats are going to track that abundance of insects, and they are going to be feeding on them. And not only that, but bats can feed more than its own body weight every night on insects. So they are great candidates to be natural pest controllers. And this has been studied by a wide variety of approaches, especially these kind of model approaches. When you say, okay, I have a colony of Tadarida plicata, which is a species of bat, and I know more or less how many grams of food of insect they can feed on, and I know an average of what a single adult of my interest pest insect is weighing. So I can do this kind of model approach where I can indirectly assess by modeling what would be the monetary value of the rice control service by bats. But the thing is that here we are using a lot of untested assumptions about the natural life cycle of the pest. So we are assuming somehow that there is a certain percentage of the adults that are going to lay a certain percentage of the eggs, and then a certain percentage of the larva is going to survive. So these kind of untested assumptions make these kind of monetary value estimates little bit of it's useful information, but the good thing is that now we have this incredible experimental approach that is leading us estimating the actual effect in the rice field or in the corn field, like in the crop, exactly in the crop, how much of the yield we are losing if tomorrow bats disappear. So the way we do that is installing, as Main and Boyles in 2015 did, these huge exclosures that are like 20 meters by 20 meters by 6 meters tall, and we set a mesh over the or over the crop, and that is how we experimentally assess what would happen with the levels of pest infection and rice or crop loss in the field, in a very direct way. This is the plus thing that has this kind of experimental approach, and that is how we can see, as long as the crop is getting to the harvest time, you can see how without the like without the depression or the suppression experiment, or the suppression by bats on the damage on the crops, we can see how that is going up, 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 and with the presence of bats, it's going to be more or less stable. So this experiment made in corn in 2015 proved that the effect of bats in cornfields was around $8 per hectare per year, mm, like reducing the damaged kernels per year. So we knew that we have some estimates made in these untested assumptions in rice, and we had this new methodology, and we needed to do it like for ourselves, especially in neotropics, which are in general sites where we really have this wide variety of bats diversity, but these kind of specific studies are not that developed yet. So we start doing this in Emiliano Zapata in Morelos, which is basically North Mexico, and we wanted to quantify the effect of insectivorous bats on the abundance of these waters, these moths, and the herbivory or crop damage that those moths were producing, and then translate that to an economic ecosystem service, like the economic value of that ecosystem service, so we can use this like this fundamental argument, which is an economic value that we can all understand, as a very powerful argument to talk to decision makers or general public. Because if I tell you that bats are important, it's not as powerful that as I tell you that bats are helping you every day, like they are partially responsible for every rice plate that you're consuming, and that is costing like the rice production economics in, I don't know, $8 or whatever. So this is a very important argument that we as bat conservationists need. So we start working in, again, central Mexico, in the Morelos state, specifically in this area that is called Emiliano Zapata, where you can see that is a little heterogeneous. So you have this urban matrix, then you have this orange patch, which is the rice crops, but also sugar cane and corn crops is very heterogeneous area. And then you have some relics of deciduous dry tropical forest. So in this kind of relics of natural vegetation, you have a lot of roost where bats are like using in the night, and then presumably we were hoping that they will be present in the surrounding areas where the pests are available for feeding. So we start working here. How this is how it looks. Rice field, a normal rice field in Emiliano Zapata in Morelos, and then in the mountains you can see that as the altitude wouldn't allow you to produce much of rice or any other crop, there are still some remnants of like native vegetation. So here we have bats in roost, and then here you have the productive areas, basically rice. And the rice that is producing here is totally produced by hand. So it's very traditional farming practices, and they transplant every plant by hand, and they do these like borders with dirt like by hand. Everything is so artisanal, and that conditions and the variety that they are using are now protected since 2012 with a denomination of origin. So it's very important. Rice is very important in this area, and the artisanal practices are joined with the advantage that they are not necessarily using a lot of agrochemicals, but they are using them. So for this experiment, we asked them not to use specifically pesticides, but they were using, of course, fertilizers and herbicides. So in this area, we have this community, like the main actors of our play would be these guys here, which are the two most abundant moths. That are the white, like the white moth of the rice, which is Rupella albinella, and Eureuma loftini, which is the Mexican rice water. And then we have 38 species of insectivorous bats that would be helping, contributing to this, like this ecosystem service that we were trying to find. But specifically, these four were like the most active in the rice fields. And at the same time, we have this distribution of the crops in the area, and we start the experimental develop was basically these kind of setups where we had an exclosure that was pairwise always with a control plot. So you get to see it with no bats and with bats. And we set up six of these experimental setups that were distributed like 300 meters from each other to 3 kilometers from each other. And each of these gigantic exclosures was 20 meters by 20 meters by 5 meters tall. And the thing here was that we wanted to prove that the pest control was due to bad activity. And the thing is that if you make exclosure that is static somehow, you are assessing also the effect of insectivorous birds, because some birds in this area also feed on some species of moths and could be helping to control this kind of pests. So the thing here was that during the 6 months that the rice was growing, we had to open every cage, every exclosure at sunrise, and to allow insectivorous birds to go inside and forage, and then close them again every day at sunset to avoid insectivorous bats to feed in there. So it was pretty intense field work. And not only that, but during the last months where we were able to see these kind of symptoms, where the spike was growing, like the last two, like 1 or 1.5 months, we were screening the totality of the 400 square meters of every one of the exclosures and the controls, and in the six experimental displays. So it was pretty much an intense field work, which we were able to have the total count every 7 days of blank panicles or empty spikes, adult waters, and then egg masses. And that information was enough to assess how much rice loss we're having with and without bats, and then transforming that rice loss in weight to an economic value, basically multiplying by the price of the unmilled rice and the price of milled rice. That was how we were able, after 6 months of field work, we were able to prove that bats were having a major impact in the rice fields, and not only in the crop damage, but also in the adult borders and in the egg masses. So we get to see that mm, bats were actually having an effect in the amount of moths that were present, almost 2 times the amount of moths were found with no bats that with the presence of bats. But that difference was having a reflex on the amount of eggs that those moths were laying. So we had, with no bats, you had more than 2 times the amount of eggs that you had with bats. And then those eggs becoming larvae and getting into the tillers was reflecting on a number of blank panicles that was 2 times greater, more than 2 times greater, if you don't have bats than if you have them. So this is huge, because this implies that no matter the size of the effect of the pest in 1 year, doesn't matter if the pest is damaging one plant of rice, or two or three, or 1 million, bats are gonna be controlling half of it. So this was proving that bats had a major importance in rice production, and this was more evident if you see it on time. So every week we were going, the difference with and without bats was higher and higher and higher and greater, at the point that at moment of harvest you had around 10 blank panicles per plot with bats, and around almost 50 in some of the plots. So this difference was the same for the adult moths, where you was like every week you were seeing that more and more moths were in the field with no bats in there. And something curious happened with the eggs. So since the pattern is the same. You have a lot more of egg masses without bats than with them. But the curious thing here is that from the middle of the flowering season, the moths were not laying any more eggs because one egg laid like in here what had no enough time to become an actual moth, so that larva will die, and that cost in energy terms mm, was not worth it to invest energy in laying eggs that were not going to able to become adults. But beyond of that, you see that there is a great difference in the pig if you don't have any predators that is controlling these egg masses laying, that if you have it. And this is huge because with that information, we were able to assess the actual impact of bats. And it was for a meal rice for around almost more than $3 per hectare per year. Per year, assuming that you're only harvesting rice once a year, but it could be double if you have like 2 seasons. And then with meal rice, you have an estimate of the impact of the economic value of pest suppression service by bats of more than $8. And if you remember, many involved were saying that the impact of bats in cornfields was around $7.50. So we're again having this extra argument so powerful that birds are having a major impact in the food productions chains worldwide. And this was of course because of Murphy's law. This was not a very intense year in terms of the pest insect effect. So we're saying that this was in a low impact year, but let's imagine what happens if we have that 50% effect or double effect of the control by the bats in a year that was supposed to totally lost, like if we were supposed to totally lost rice yield in a certain area, bats are at least having an impact of the half of the rice production. So this is not a small thing. So what I wanna conclude here is just that these kind of methodologies are allowing us to have these very powerful arguments that bats are needed to be included in integrated management strategies, and the all way around the agricultural institution have to be integrated in bats conservation strategies. So again, the important thing here is that bats are very important for food security, for rice production, but not only rice. This has been proved in cacao, in coffee, in corn, in grapes. So next time you eat chocolate or eat a plate of rice, say thank you for that for 2 bats. Thank you all for being here, and any question you have, let me know.
Wow. Carol, thank you so much. It was absolutely brilliant session that. And it's sort of a masterclass in how to talk about balance in nature, food security, and I think back to Pavan Sukhdev's work, the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity, TEEB, where, one way of getting people to understand food security or the value of nature is to run it through to a value, a dollar value, because it
Totally.
means something to us. So even if people don't get the science, or if they're not connected well to nature in themselves, certainly they need food and need to understand the value of money. And if
Exactly.
you're the common denominator between all of that is chocolate and rice, and in particular bats. And I particularly enjoyed the way you proved it. everything you announced and spoke about with a value, you then quickly went back to prove it. So hey, there's no doubt we measured this. We put
Exactly.
nets over here, and here's the difference. Do you find is that something that you've had to develop more and more, a way of proving to people that your numbers and your facts are correct?
Can you say that again, please?
Have you had to work very hard to prove to people that your results are correct?
Well, it depends on on the public. Generally, it's very easy because this is such an universal language. As you were saying, people can relate very easily to money and food because it's a very daily thing. Um, and the good thing about this kind of experimental design that is very straight. So you're not doing this. Okay, I'm based in literature assumptions or untested assumptions is very straight. It's like I put a exclosure in here and this happened. So it has been pretty easy to explain my results. The not easy part was to convince the producers at the first place to let me put a gigantic exclosures on the rice fields because I was so convinced that they might be having an effect. So, and if I was right, they were losing rice. That is the thing that I was trying to convince them to let me put something that if it went right, it was going to make them lose rice. So it was that was the hard part, like um, making my way to prove this with like in the community, but they were like at the end of the experiment they were so happy. So this is the good thing about this kind of experiments, that it's very straight and easy to prove to other people.
It's great, Carol. 'Cause it's so important that everybody understands the challenges in getting these kinds of results. It really is. And you didn't mention it, but not everybody has a good relationship with bats. You know, I
Yeah,
love them, and many people love them. You obviously love them, but a lot of people, bats,
totally. Bats are one of the most unfairly treated animals on earth, and that is kind of why I work to prove why are they so important in our daily life. But yeah, most people think that they only drink blood and they are going to attack you and bite you at night, and that is not the case. So we have more than 1,400 species of bats in the world, and only three eat blood. And from those three, only one is the responsible for eating blood from the cattle. And the other, like 75% of the species from those 1,400 are actually insect eating bats. So so they are like most majority of them are helping us, not only controlling these kind of insects, they are controlling disease vectors as mosquitoes, and they are having these major impacts on ecosystem balance. And the others that are not controlling pests are pollinating like bees, but at night. And the others are dispersing seeds and try and helping to reforest the tropical rainforest. So they have this major importance. So yeah, that's why we are here, to convince more and more people about how important are they.
it's absolutely brilliant, Carol. And here we are. We're approaching tomorrow is International Biodiversity Day, as you know. So your talk here is a great example of leading into it. So thank you very much, Carol. Keep up the great work, and thanks so much again for joining us today.
Thank you all for being here, and to you
Okay,
for the
we'll see you,
invitation.
Carol. Thank you.